Supreme Court strikes down presidential tariff power. What happens now? This is not just a legal ruling. This is a $30+ billion economic shockwave. Today, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that the president cannot use the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, to impose sweeping global tariffs without explicit authorization from Congress. Chief Justice John Roberts made it clear, when Congress delegates tariff authority, it must do so explicitly and with strict limits. Translation: the executive branch cannot unilaterally tax global imports under emergency powers. Why does this matter? Because tariffs are taxes. Between 2018 and 2024, U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods rose from about 3% to nearly 19% on average. Economists at the Federal Reserve and major universities estimated that these tariffs reduced U.S. GDP by 0.3% to 0.5% annually at peak impact, that is, between $70 billion and $120 billion in lost economic output per year in today's U.S. economy. American households were estimated to pay between $600 and $200 more per year due to higher prices passed on by importers. Steel tariffs temporarily helped domestic steel producers, but downstream industries, automotive, construction, machinery, agriculture, faced higher input costs. The Peterson Institute estimated that for every job protected in steel production, several jobs were put at risk in manufacturing sectors dependent on steel. Agriculture took a direct hit. U.S. soybean exports to China fell sharply during trade tensions, forcing the federal government to distribute over $20 billion in farm support payments. At the global level, the World Trade Organization reported trade growth slowed dramatically during peak tariff escalation. The IMF warned prolonged trade conflicts could reduce global GDP by up to 0.8%. Now here's the twist. At the time of this ruling, the U.S. trade deficit had recently narrowed to $29.4 billion in 1 month, the lowest level since 2009, partly reflecting tariff effects and shifting import patterns. But deficit shrinking does not automatically mean stronger GDP. Reduced imports can also reflect slower domestic demand. So what happens next? First major question: refunds. If certain tariffs imposed under IEPA are ruled unlawful, importers could seek reimbursement. That could mean billions of dollars in repayment claims, depending on how lower courts interpret implementation. Second, contingency strategies. The administration still has other tools. Section 301 Trade Authority for Unfair Trade Practices. Section 232 National Security Tariffs, Anti-Dumping and Countervailing Duty, Investigations. Congressional legislation granting explicit tariff power, negotiated bilateral trade. Agreements the White House could pivot toward narrower, industry-specific tariffs that fall within existing statutory authority. Or it could push Congress for new legislation to restore broader tariff powers. But here's the political reality. Congressional approval requires votes, and trade policy divides both parties. Markets generally respond positively to clarity. Predictable trade rules encourage capital investment, manufacturing expansion, and hiring. If tariff uncertainty declines, sectors like automotive, industrial manufacturing, and real estate development, which rely heavily on materials pricing, may see improved cost stability. However, if the administration responds with alternative aggressive trade tools, volatility could return. This ruling reasserts constitutional boundaries. Congress controls taxation. The executive cannot bypass that authority using emergency statutes not explicitly designed for global tariff programs. Economically, the impact will depend on policy response. If trade policy becomes more stable, GDP growth could improve modestly through increased investment confidence. If escalation continues through other legal channels, costs could resurface. The bottom line? This decision reshapes presidential trade power. It could trigger refunds. It could force Congress into the trade debate. It could calm global markets or reignite legislative battles. But one thing is clear: today's ruling is not just about tariffs. It is about who controls America's economic steering wheel and how much certainty businesses, workers, and global markets can expect going forward.